So something's going on with OnlyFans, and no, it's not the obvious. Hey, it's Christine Grace. Welcome back to my channel. Today's another reaction video. Like the video on your way in. Let's get straight into it. So today's video is a bit of a different one. I saw this video, the rise and fall of OnlyFans, and it's got like 500,000 views in 2 weeks. Now, I didn't know that there was a fall of OnlyFans. I thought it was still in full swing. I'm still seeing the main characters, Sophie Rain and others that I forget the names of, who are still making like stupid money off of this thing. So I didn't know it had fallen. So let's check it out, see what's going on.
The owner of OnlyFans made $700 million last year, 46 employees and no debt. By almost any measure, it is one of the absolute best and most profitable businesses on the internet. About a year ago, the owner of the business tried to sell it and has been struggling ever since to get a high price for it. Why is one of the most profitable businesses in the history of the internet struggling to sell? The answer to that stems of how the whole business came together. It all started with a $10,000 loan from one guy's dad to him to go and start the business. And today, $7.2 billion in revenue flows through OnlyFans. If you think about it, what should a business that generates $700 million a year in cash trade for? Like, if that was on the public stock market, it would be incredibly highly valued, multiple tens of billions. But here we are. And OnlyFans is kind of stuck. And look, this is a crazy story with OnlyFans. It is also one of the most difficult videos to make. I mean, in the end, this is an adult website. Well, I did no first-person research on this, unlike I did with most of the fast food videos and coffee ones. But in the end, we'll talk about, because there's some crazy business lessons in this whole thing.
But before we get into that, I want to let you know that a great way for cool guys. Anyway, you'll get
how and actually
automatically, plus all the other ones I've done. Now, let's get back to the video.
How OnlyFans got to where it is today actually starts back in 2016, not that long ago. And it actually starts in England. A young man who is living in Essex.
What? I didn't know this. Did you guys know this? What?
And had gone to kind of a second-tier English university, a man named Tim Stokely. Well, he's a hustler and an entrepreneur. And look, the adult business tends to attract a certain type of folks. They're people that decide that that's an okay market to be in. And Tim was that type of person. His first few websites were adult-oriented, called Cams for You and Glams for whatever. Basically kind of off-brand, adult pornography type websites. He tried a few other things, none of which took off. One of them was like a matchmaking site, so like an Angie's List for tradespeople. Didn't go anywhere, and ultimately he was about to run out of money. So he went to his dad, who was a banker in England, and said, "Dad, I need some more money to keep trying these business ventures." And his dad said, "Look, this is the last loan I'm going to give you. Here's £10,000 and see what you can do with it." This last shot would be a business called OnlyFans. But OnlyFans back then was not what OnlyFans is today. They actually, from the very beginning, banned adult content. The idea
I've heard this before.
was basically to be Patreon, but on steroids, where people connect directly with their fans and basically do business with them. They wanted musicians, artists, creators, all that type of stuff. The creators would keep 80% of the revenue. The platform would take 20%. The problem was there was already a Patreon doing Patreon very well. So the Stokeleys were stuck, and eventually they needed to make some money. So in 2017, they quietly lifted the ban on adult content. And suddenly, adult performers and people in the adult industry flooded the platform. And for the first time, these creators can earn directly from their audience. No middlemen, no promoters, nobody taking 90% of the cut. And they can start to build their own business going directly to their fans. Growth is steady. Like, they managed to make payroll and keep going, but there's nothing really to grab headlines or to start kind of the snowball of popularity for OnlyFans at the time, until somebody comes along that sees something in the site and potential that they don't. And in 2018, that man is Leonid Radvinsky. He comes in and he buys 75% of the parent company of OnlyFans. Leonid is, like a lot of people in the adult industry, famously quiet and reclusive. He's never given a podcast interview. His photos are rarely found on the internet. Heck, I don't even know if we're going to be able to find one when we edit this video. And he's the son of immigrants who'd moved to the US from Ukraine. He got a degree back in 2002 from Northwestern, I think it was, in Chicago. And his very first business had been, well, you guessed it, in the adult industry. One of his subsequent ventures in 2004 was called My Free Cams. And it was basically a site where people could, well, basically do live streams of their, adult stuff.
Sex sells. Sex always sells.
And His growth tactics were so extreme and so aggressive that Microsoft eventually sued him on behalf of Hotmail users for the types of growth hacks that he was doing to try to get new people on the platform. After he bought out...
That's dedication. You know, from a moral aspect, I'm like, oh my gosh, dude, like chill out. But from a business perspective, it's like, okay, well, guy's dedicated.
OnlyFans in 2017, 2018, Tim stayed on as CEO. But behind the scenes, it was Leonid calling the shots. And his vision was to turn OnlyFans into a hive of pornography. I quoted that somebody wrote that in my research, so I didn't make up that phrase. Almost immediately, stuff started to go wrong, but not what you imagine. What went wrong was on the financial side. In 2019, Metro Bank, who had controlled all the accounts for OnlyFans, basically shut down all of their banking services with no notice. Radvinsky and his team went crazy to go try to find a new banking relationship, but this was the first message that they were going to be hearing from the financial system. Everybody from the credit card companies to the banks didn't want to be doing business with adult-oriented websites, and OnlyFans was definitely one of those. Then came a lucky break for OnlyFans. The COVID pandemic. In March 2020, the world basically shut down. At that moment, I remember...
Yes, that's when it all became popular, isn't it?
That time when the NBA game was canceled and suddenly we all felt like the world was going to be shutting down very quickly. With everybody trapped in their homes, suddenly OnlyFans was poised to explode. In that first month of COVID, the user base grew 75% for OnlyFans. Supposedly, they were averaging between 6,000 and 8,000 new creators per day and over 200,000 new users. The entire adult industry was basically shut down. You couldn't go to gentlemen's clubs, you couldn't go outside your house, and people needed an outlet, and they went to OnlyFans. In April 2020, they started to make the leap into the mainstream. And part of what did that was Beyonce name dropped OnlyFans in a collab she did with Megan Thee Stallion. Traffic jumped 15% overnight just from that song. Then suddenly, the rest of cultural mainstream started to recognize and know about OnlyFans. Cardi B, all these different folks started to mention OnlyFans in their stuff, and it was getting amplified as part of the culture.
Whitney Cummings, that's disappointing. That's real disappointing. She's a comedian. I've watched some of her stuff. Like she's quite funny. I wouldn't have guessed that from her.
Then in August 2020, a lady named Bella
I remember this chick. She was a Disney show star.
Thorne signed up for OnlyFans. She reportedly made $1 million in 24 hours and another couple million the next day. She was not selling explicit photos or explicit content. She was charging $200 per message with fans who thought they were messaging with her in order to get copies of explicit photos. But the problem was when they actually went to request the photos and go through the whole thing and paid the money, they just didn't get anything that was X-rated. The longtime creators on the platform kind of tricked and used all of the
Is that not fraud?
user base who were expecting one thing and got another, basically created a ton of refund requests that the users asked for their money back when they felt, well, cheated. OnlyFans makes money by taking a percentage of each transaction. So when we talk about revenue numbers for it, we're talking about net revenue. Remember, most of the money coming in goes straight back out to the creators. YouTube is like this, by the way, as well. 55% of every dollar you spend on the platform or advertisers pay goes to folks like me. So thank you for watching. So net revenue, the percentage take that OnlyFans was taking, started exploding. In 2020, they did $375 million. In 2021, it was nearly $1 billion. OnlyFans was printing more money faster than almost any company in history.
And what does this say? What does this say? This, you know, when you look at the stats and you see that things like hookup culture are on the rise and, you know, women seem to be sleeping around, that's a small percentage of folk. There is a small percentage of folk that are all sleeping with each other. But actually, when you look at the data, most young people specifically aren't having sex anymore. I personally am of the opinion that a lot of it is to do with this. A lot of it is to do with the fact that why would they bother getting into the headache of getting involved with a real life woman when accessing explicit content and at least feeling like you have a connection to the person through platforms like OnlyFans is so much easier and more efficient, I guess. I don't know. I'd be intrigued to hear you guys' thoughts on that because I can't really think from the male perspective, but that's what I see.
of the internet. And they were doing it all at a crazy scale with a tiny number of people, only 46 employees. But as the platform grew, something else was starting to emerge that was going to be a real problem for it. And this was a shadowy industry that was created around the platform itself. As creators on the platform started to scale, suddenly it was becoming impossible for them to keep up with the flood of what was happening, which was DMs were where the real money was made. People were creating basically parasocial relationships between the creators and the customers. In other words, somebody who had a credit card might think they had a direct relationship with the producer of the content, the star, but in reality, that's not what was happening. What was happening was the scale was so great the creators couldn't keep up. So in stepped a new type of company, people who had agencies that would go run these accounts on behalf of the creators. In other words, people who thought they were talking directly with the creator were basically chatting with who knows who, some random.
And again, this plays into the fraud thing. You know, if you are going to speak to your audience directly, like, it needs to be you. Especially if you're charging for it, like, it needs to be you. Otherwise, like, I don't get how legally, obviously morally I think it's wrong, but legally I don't know how you're allowed to get away with that, because surely that's fraud. That's impersonating and pretending to be someone.
Person with hairy knuckles located in some foreign country who is probably not even the same gender as the creator. So while this person might think they were talking to the creator, in reality they were talking to somebody in the Philippines or Pakistan or India or South America or any place that was different than the creator. And that person might be managing 3, 4, or 5 relationships at the same time, all with one goal. How do they get that person who has the credit card to swipe it as many times as possible, thinking they're talking to the real creator? This kind of scamming had its own term created by the New York Times. They called it e-pimping. Basically, these folks' job was to scam, cheat, lie, and mislead people with credit cards, basically lonely men typically, to swipe it as often as possible. So you see the problem of what's going on as these agencies emerge. You've got basically relationships that are built totally on a lie. And behind it all is OnlyFans taking 20% of each and every one of those scam transactions. So while OnlyFans pretended to sell a relationship with a real person, they were selling you basically somebody in a call center trying to get you to open up your wallet as quickly as possible. But then MasterCard, one of the 2 major credit card networks in the world, in 2021 announced a new policy that would make that very difficult. It was called AN 5196. And 5196 basically said that any website that was taking MasterCards, that was producing adult content, had to go through and examine each and every piece of content before it went out without fail. They required further that each and every producer of content had to have government IDs issued and verified by the platform. Every piece of content, every single person, this all had to be done by October 2021, or platforms like OnlyFans would run the risk of not being able to take credit cards anymore.
Yep, that seems fair.
These requirements had a simple goal stated, which was they didn't want people to be using these websites to do things like child exploitation and trafficking of humans for the purpose of basically making money because of their bodies and appearance. But it's also worth asking if the real intent behind all of that was making things like OnlyFans basically too expensive to operate on the internet. With everything else and a lot of life, there's no such things as black or white answers to stuff. Life is complicated. The ACLU got involved. They basically filed a formal complaint saying that this policy by MasterCard...
Oh no, not sex workers' livelihoods. I'm sure they'll find a way to make money. They've already chosen to do OnlyFans. I'm sure if they're real dedicated to the sex work, it's very easy to make money in other ways. Like how they used to. Make prostitutes great again, get them back on the street corner instead of on OnlyFans. I'm sorry, that was dark.
Was restricting First Amendment rights for...
No, at the end of the day, I think I agree with that. I think that is scamming people. If you are paying money to speak to someone and you're not actually speaking to them and there's no way to actually prove that you are speaking to them, then obviously restrictions need to be imposed on that. Now, it's difficult because you are talking about people's identities. So I understand this angle of, censoring free speech, this, that, and the other. But at the end of the day, you're not an identity at that point. You're a product. And people are paying essentially for that product and you are not providing that product. That's fraud. Under the Consumer Rights Act in the UK, that's grounds for a refund. You've paid for something and the goods that are provided are not what was advertised, you know, you are absolutely entitled to a refund in the UK. So, you know, it is a scam. It is fraud. So, yeah, I think that's my angle, is that once you sign up to something like OnlyFans, or you have any, even like this, you have any kind of platform that essentially becomes a business, right? At that point, you know, if people are, say, booking on meetings with you, maybe you've got a consultancy, like whatever it is, at that point, like, it's a product. So this whole idea of like a person's free speech, it's like, no. Once you are charging for your time, that time that is being charged for is the product. And it is of your duty to provide what is expected and what is advertised to be expected within that product, which involves it actually being you. Maybe it's a wild take these days, but I don't know. I just think you need to have some authenticity about yourself. I don't know. What do I know? I'm not making 40 million a year. World's messed up like that.
Basically sex workers, and making it difficult for many of them to earn a living. It's the ACLU, after all. Basically, this backed OnlyFans into a corner. At the same time, you had folks like Mellon Bank, JP Morgan Chase, basically shutting down their ability to move money around in wires. The reality is, in America and in most of the world, if you're cut off from the banking system, it makes it incredibly difficult to do almost anything, much less, you can't even pay your mortgage if you're cut off from the banking system. And it's even worse if you're a big business like OnlyFans. And they were getting backed into a corner. On August 19th, 2021, they did something pretty crazy. They announced that on October 1st, they would no longer allow adult-oriented content to exist on OnlyFans. And by this point, like, that was the name of the business. That's what the whole business is. It's an adult website. They were
I don't remember this.
suddenly saying, hey, OnlyFans, we're not going to allow any more.
Obviously, it didn't last.
That going forward. Stokely, who was still involved in leading the business, he basically went on media tours and said, hey, the banks have forced us to do this. We can't be in the adult business anymore. Creators went and started to look up on other sites, like one's called Fansly and stuff like that. Also, never seen that one. But in the end, like, Tim and his folks said, the reason we have to do this is we have to be connected to the money system to be a business. And here was OnlyFans unable to do that. But in a crazy turn of events, 6 days later, OnlyFans came out and said, well, we're reversing that decision. Suddenly they had managed to find new banking partners. What had happened in the background was creators and the public had started to pressure the banks. Tim going out and being public about the banks causing the shutdown of adult.
This is a real reflection of society, isn't it? This is a real reflection of society, because even when the institutions do what people are calling for, you know, like the sort of traditional conservative movements and stuff, calling for governments, institutions, put bans on porn, ban this, ban that, you know, which you can agree with on a personal level. Like, I don't think porn is good for people. I don't think people should watch it. But people do, you know, and I do, you know, for the most part, believe in democracy. Like, what the people want and what the people are demanding for, especially if it's like a capitalist model, like people are willing to pay for it, then you kind of, you know, you kind of have to just allow it, you know, and you have to set the moral standard of these are the morals and ethics behind it. And really, you can only control yourself in this life. You can only make the decisions for you and your family and the people you care about, like, that works for you. So this is a real reflection of society, because it's like, it shows you that even when people, institutions, corporations act as a collective to make the statement that this is morally wrong, hence we've put injunctions on it, the people always hold the most power. And it's the people, it's us, it's the ones that are constantly saying, you know, sex work is bad, pornography is bad. But really, there's a reason that creators are making hundreds of millions of pounds, dollars, whatever it is. There's a reason OnlyFans became more successful than the tech sectors. You know, there's a reason that they reversed their decision. There's a reason that another bank eventually said, hey, do you know what? There's too much money being made here for us to not be in on it. Because it works. And people are watching. And people are paying. Ethical and moral judgments aside, that's telling you something. That's telling you something about the state of society. And I feel like a lot of people want to say things like, oh, we should ban porn and these OnlyFans girls shouldn't be allowed to do what they do. But the onus of responsibility isn't just on them. It's on the men as well. It's on the consumers. because it's a collective decision. We have to collectively decide to make society better so that things like OnlyFans don't become so appealing, tempting, easy, effective to buy into, if that makes sense.
Content had caused all those people who were on both sides of those transactions to put pressures on those banks. In reality, there had been kind of a standoff also. Those banks, they want to make money, and the way they make money is by having money flow through their system. And here was a big source of that money about to be totally cut off. The reality is,
See?
all of these kind of shadow industries, ammo, guns, adult content, cannabis, they all exist in kind of a gray area, and there's an inherent tension there. The banks and all the financial system, they want to be making money from those transactions. There's a lot of cash there. At the same time, they're getting pressure from the other side, which is like gray area is gray area for a reason. It's sometimes outside the law, and sometimes there's a lot of people in those industries doing not good stuff. And the interesting thing of where America's gone, so much of our regulation and expectation about the morality of society is getting not done by the government or by the courts or by the laws or by our legislatures. It's getting done by the whims and decisions being made by big corporations.
But I would argue that the decisions being made by those big corporations are reflective of what the people are demanding. Because if the people weren't demanding it, if it wasn't such a high demand from the people, then the corporations wouldn't feel a need or tendency to give in to these vices. You know, they wouldn't feel a need to give in to companies like OnlyFans and say the drug and gun markets and things like that if there wasn't such a demand of them. I feel like sometimes as a society, and I see this especially from the sort of traditional conservative types, we seem to have this idea where we forget or like try to forget the atrocities of the world. Like we try to act like, oh no, like that's just a small thing that's happening and we're just going to put it over here and we're going to take the moral high ground, which is like good, great for you guys, like absolutely great. And I think collectively we should all choose to make that decision. But in doing that, sometimes you can create almost a bit of an illusion. Now they say ignorance is bliss, and maybe that's a wise idea, but it does mean that using the whole like just get married, have kids, don't watch porn, and the world will get better like that. When the truth is that I saw this stat recently and it was like a big majority of people who are paying for OnlyFans content are married men. So you're kind of, by giving that kind of advice, you are almost ignoring what's going on. And the fact that these corporations and banks did a 180 on this thing is reflective of how starved the population is, the male population specifically, because obviously it's men mostly paying for OnlyFans content. So whilst, yes, it's the men's fault that they are buying into this, they're creating the demand, and the onus of responsibility for that is absolutely on the individual. If you decide to spend your money, that is your decision. No one's forcing you to make that decision. Just in the same way, you know, the girls who do OnlyFans and then say, oh, I demand respect. It's like no one's forcing you to degrade yourself on the internet. You don't get to then demand respect and, you know, be treated like you're more than your body when you've advertised only your body as your product. You know, the onus of responsibility is on both parties. But, you know, there's something deeper going on there. Why are the men buying it? Because sex work has always been sex work. Sex has always sold, right? Men have always paid for hookers, prostitutes, this, that, and the other. But it wasn't as easily accessible. And now it is easily accessible. Like, I don't believe that that's just the answer. The answer is just, oh, well, it's so much more accessible, so of course men are going to buy it. No, that implies that men are children and that men have absolutely no self-control. And I think that's too simplistic of an argument, you know, because it could be easily accessible. But people have self-control. People have free will. It could be easily accessible and a lot of people could decide, like, I'm just not interested. If their lives, if maybe the dating market was more satisfying to be in. You know, because I feel like people who get into this stuff, people who are, like, addicted to porn and drugs, alcohol, gambling, like any of the vices, that comes from a depraved place. You're trying to fill something. And, you know, everything we talk on this channel is about, you know, the gaps between men and women, how dissatisfied a lot of men feel with modern women. So it's like the reasonings for what's going on is so much more complicated. Like he said, life isn't black and white. There's so much more grey area to be discussed than merely, oh, it's easily accessible and men can't control themselves and women are degenerate and all women are caving into this. It's like, there's so much more going on than just that. And I struggle with the whole, you know, you got the super, like, there's like areas of the red pill that say like, oh, the OnlyFans stuff is like men have no responsibility for that and it's only the women's fault because the women are doing this and men can't control themselves. I don't buy into that. And then you have the other side, which is like, oh, it's the men's fault for creating the demand. And, you know, the women aren't responsible. They're just feeding into that market. It's like, no, both parties are responsible here. And this is showing us something that's going on a great scale, which means there's a problem that needs to be addressed and tended to. But no one wants to tend to that because everyone's got uncomfortable. Everyone's got uncomfortable with the way things are, and the corporations and the banks are making a shit ton of money, so why would they care?
And it's kind of crazy. If you look at it now, it's become a normal expectation that we expect all these folks who are running businesses to become both the morality and legal police for the American society. Stokely had had enough. 4 months later, he stepped down in December 2021. There was a new CEO for a bit. And then in 2023, they brought in a new CEO to run the company. That person, well, is a lawyer. That person's name is Keely Blair. And that tells you what's going to be the real battles for OnlyFans going forward. Over the next 4 years, Radvinsky ran the company his way. With Stokely out of the way, the company had one mission, and that was to put money in the pocket of Radvinsky. Over the next 4 years, the company has distributed $1.4 billion in cash to this one man alone. Even after all that distribution, the company was making $46 million per employee. Basically makes it more efficient per employee than almost any other company on the world. I mean, you go look at Google and Microsoft, Salesforce, Tesla, some of the great giant enterprises of the world, like they make nowhere near that. A lot of them are making 200 or 300,000 per employees, not 46 million. The reason is the business model. OnlyFans has software that they run, they rent data centers, and all they do is just take 20 cents of every dollar that flows through the platform. The creators do all the work creating the stuff, the customers break out their credit cards. While no politician would ever visit their office in the UK for good reason, in total, OnlyFans pays more tax than Starbucks, IBM, and Microsoft combined. 167 million in the past year, for example. But remember the rise of all those kind of agencies that were creating fake relationships on behalf of creators and basically scamming the customers? Well, people started to notice this. Law firms have started to file class action lawsuits. The first few have been dismissed, but more and more are coming in. The public is starting to learn that the whole thing's kind of a scam. But that's not the biggest problem happening. The biggest disruption coming at this next point into 2022 and beyond is AI. On a positive,
I've often thought this, and I've seen people already discussing how to do it. And I think this is going to be a problem on many platforms. AI is getting scary. I mean, some of the guys in my WhatsApp community were showing me, like, it is crazy realistic, the things you can do with AI right now. And that is going to ruin a lot of the online sphere. Not just for like OnlyFans creators, but, you know, for other creators. I mean, there's already so many YouTubers out there that they don't actually, you know, it's not them in front of the camera. It's some form of AI. Now, maybe I just don't understand that side of the internet, but it takes that human element out of it, you know, being able to see someone's facial expressions, being able to scan someone's face, the little micro expressions, the body language, things like that. Like, I think there's, at least in my opinion, I feel like there is a degree of responsibility as a creator to actually be you. Now, obviously, if the idea is that you're creating a character and it's kind of like an avatar and it's not really meant to be like a human thing, then like, I guess, sure, like whatever. Again, maybe I'm just not understanding that side of things. But in terms of any kind of content creation, AI is going to ruin the space. You know, there's often now online that I will see videos and I'll be like, oh, that's interesting. And then I realize it's AI. And I don't know where the progression is from there, what the world looks like from that point onwards. I remember years ago when I was in my sort of early teen years learning about this idea of the singularity and what's going to be the next real existential threat to human civilization. And even, you know, 10 years ago, everyone said it was AI. And now you've got the likes of Elon Musk saying, well, then the logical conclusion is to like almost like get on side with the AI before it ruins everything. But I honestly, I don't know. I don't know what the step forward is. I don't know how we go back from that. And I don't know what that means for the future of civilization. As I said, there's already a problem with men and women. This is reflected by things like OnlyFans and how successful the company is. And when you bring AI into that mix and you have, you know, things like AI girlfriends and boyfriends, AI therapy, AI self-actualization classes, you know, you get into a very scary realm where, you know, you're looking at, again, birth rates dropping. You get into a very scary realm of, well, is this the end? And that's obviously where the black pill and stuff comes into it. And that is a scary thought. I don't know how people live with that. I know a lot of people do. I know there's a lot of you I've seen in the comments that are completely, you know, black pilled and like, world's on its way out. Let's just enjoy it. But that's still, I'm not quite there yet. That still scares me. So I don't know what the way forward or out is. So why don't you let me know what you think in the comment section below. As always, if you enjoyed today's video, please do give it a thumbs up on your way out. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell to keep up to date with all of my content. If you would like to reach out, you can reach me via email or by joining the WhatsApp community in the link below. And if you'd like to consider donating to the channel, you can do that by clicking the various links in the description at Buy Me a Coffee and PayPal. On that note, guys, I will see you very soon in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.